Welcome to Northwest Newsweek, and thanks for being with us. The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls held its sessions this past week in Thunder Bay, receiving testimony from those closest to the victims. It's an effort to understand the systemic causes of violence against Indigenous people across Canada and how the country can improve. Shally Lee reports from the Nor'Wester Hotel on day one of the inquiry.
Delaine Copenass was 16 years old when she went for a walk and never came home. Her body was later found in Lake of the Woods along the Kenora waterfront. Copenass's mother, Anita Ross, says OPP told her no foul play was suspected, but that was before a postmortem happened. Ross told National Inquiry commissioners this was just one of many police interactions that didn't make sense. Ross says police delayed opening a missing persons case and had already searched the area where Copenass's body would be found.
I don't believe my daughter's body was in there that entire time she was missing. Because if she was there, they should have found her during that underwater search.
Ross says some police officers were honest and sincere with her during the search, but feels many of her concerns were dismissed. Next, Crystal Davies spoke about her mother, who BC police say was one of convicted serial killer Robert Pickton's many victims. Pickton killed nearly 50 women between 1996 and 2002, many of whom were Indigenous, drug users, or sex trade workers. Davies says those women were overlooked by police and the public precisely because of their race, profession, or lifestyle.
We need to stop labeling our people because it dehumanizes them. It makes it okay that they're disposable, and it's not okay.
Commissioner Brian Eilifson says this is something the inquiry is encountering over and over again. First Nations people having what they say are legitimate concerns dismissed.
We're hearing a lot of people come before us expressing that in their experience they feel that they've been treated differently than non-Indigenous people. Yes, that's coming up a lot.
Like many other local hearings, Monday's session of the inquiry also featured art to honor missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The local chapter of Walking with Our Sisters was on hand to provide support to those giving testimony, as well as to hand out red dress pins like these, which commemorate those who have gone missing or have been murdered. The inquiry continues in Thunder Bay on Tuesday and Wednesday. Shally Lee, TBT News.
And the second day of Thunder Bay's hearings for the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls brought raw emotions out of one of the inquiry commissioners who says its mandate doesn't go far enough. Shally Lee also has more on that and the testimony given by survivors, friends, and family of those missing women.
Lillian Southwind left photos of her mother, Viola Panachese, with provincial police after Panachese's disappearance from Sioux Lookout in 1991. OPP said they would return them after making copies. But at the second day of inquiry hearings in Thunder Bay, Southwind told commissioners she regrets her decision because police would lose those photos and her mother's entire missing persons file.
You know, the OPP losing her file for how long? What if I didn't go ask for my pictures all the time? Would they have even known?
Southwind says police only admitted the loss after she repeatedly demanded the return of those pictures. Police told Southwind the file was rebuilt using officer notes, but not before several witnesses died. Later, commissioners heard from the family of Sarah Skunk, a Mishkegoguming woman who went missing in Thunder Bay in 1995. Skunk's family says they felt sidelined during that investigation, as well as another case when Skunk's grandniece went missing.
I didn't know where she was. We located her. I asked the police for help. And I gave them some information. I told them, they asked me what her background was. I told them she was Native. A whole different attitude after that.
Commissioners became emotional after that testimony, and Michelle Audette said she felt the inquiry should be extended and that she wished its mandate included the power to reopen cases. Audette also said she wasn't certain if she would be removed as a commissioner, but later clarified she meant inquiries are often long. With commissioners, that could change.
Maybe I might be, and I said that if I'm not there anymore, as long that the mandate continue. It's not the first inquiry way before us. When the first year is done, do they keep the same commissioner? I have a feeling they will, but it's a political decision, it's not ours.
Now, in addition to the 2 public hearing rooms, which commissioners alternated visiting throughout the day, there were also several rooms set aside for private in-camera testimony. The inquiry's visit to Thunder Bay concludes on Wednesday with a full day scheduled for private hearings. Xiaoli Li, TBT News.
The Ontario Native Women's Association had a mission to make families taking part in that inquiry feel at home here in Thunder Bay. Onwa offered a shuttle service between the Nor'Wester Hotel, where the inquiry was being held, and its office on Ray Boulevard. The organization had elders on hand to speak to the families, along with a sacred fire and smudging services. They also had beads available for crafting and food on site. Program manager Rachel Sagwin says it's all about making families feel comfortable.
A lot of them are coming from northern communities to come here, so they're not familiar with Thunder Bay itself. And having those cultural groundings is going to assist them in their healing throughout the week. It's going to provide them with the supports that they need and a place that they can go to and just relax and take them away from everything that's going on.
Onwa also stationed a ceremonial red dress at the inquiry made to honor the spirits of all missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The Anishinaabe Police Service requested the assistance of the Ontario Provincial Police regarding the deaths of 2 persons in the community of Cat Lake First Nation. The investigation has confirmed that the 2 persons were victims of homicide. 18-year-old Austin Wellesley of Cat Lake First Nation has been charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of uttering threats, and 1 count of assault. This investigation remains ongoing. A 2-vehicle collision last Sunday afternoon has claimed the life of a Kenora woman. It happened on Highway 17 just west of Kenora when an SUV came into collision with a tractor-trailer unit. The driver of the SUV, 73-year-old Mary Kozak, was pronounced dead at the scene. The crash forced the closure of the highway for several hours, and there's still no word on what the cause of the collision was. Northwestern Ontario's business leaders got an encouraging view of the forestry industry Wednesday at a Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce event. The Forest Products Association of Canada, also known as FPAC, is the trade association for Canada's pulp and paper producers. The head of that group says despite trade bluster from the U.S. and possible changes to species at risk legislation, it's a bumper time for softwood lumber. Xiaoli Li has more.
It's the lifeblood of many northwestern Ontario communities and their economies. Canadian softwood lumber may be facing challenges on both sides of the border, but the industry is strong. Strong enough that an $867 million federal softwood assistance fund announced in May hasn't even been used.
Our companies are doing quite well in the softwood space right now. We're seeing a lot of innovation in terms of some of the biomaterials and biofuels, so we think that holds a lot of promise for northwestern Ontario.
That's according to Derek Nyber, head of the Forest Products Association of Canada. At a Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce luncheon, Nyber talked about the challenges facing forestry nationwide. Across Canada, there are fewer young people going into the forestry industry, and the ongoing softwood lumber dispute with the U.S. is still a concern. Nyber says foresters aren't certain if the market will stay strong and are focusing on diversifying both products and markets.
We also want to make sure that we're getting into product areas that are products of the future, so supporting mills that need to transform and invest in their business so they can produce materials. But the other part of it is growing the markets out there. How can we maybe get more product to China or other markets so we're not so dependent on the U.S.?
Many people at the Chamber event were concerned with possible changes to species at risk legislation that could affect the industry's supply. Chamber President Charlotte Robinson says the Ontario government is going back for more consultation, a move that's being welcomed.
Now we're just trying to make sure that they understand the northern views and that they are getting the northern voice rather than just maybe a sort of a small section of a certain demographic that's commenting on those legislation and regulation that will have a significant impact on our community.
Xiaoli Li, TBT News.
There's no serious injuries to report following a crash of a small plane at the Sioux Lookout Airport. OPP say the crash occurred last Saturday as the craft, which was carrying 2 people, was coming in for landing. One of the occupants was transported to hospital for treatment of minor injuries and was then released. The cause of the crash remains under investigation. Well, stay with us because coming up after the break, Ontario NDP leader Andrea Horwath makes a stop in Thunder Bay, calling out the province on hospital funding and gridlock issues.
Cumulatively over a decade, that has caused a huge crisis in the hospital sector.
Ontario's new Democratic leader was in Thunder Bay Monday for a pre-campaign stop. Andrea Horwath says the province has created a crisis in healthcare over the past decade, specifically in regard to hospital funding and what's commonly referred to as gridlock. Adam Riley has more.
Different communities have different needs. Northern communities have different needs than, let's say, downtown Toronto.
Ontario's new Democratic Party is not backing down when it comes to assessing and identifying issues with the province's healthcare system. Andrea Horwath was in Thunder Bay Monday to discuss her party's plan for healthcare should they attain power.
One of the things we do is not look only at a kind of a cookie cutter formula. So we have to engage with local healthcare providers. We have to engage with the administration of the hospital. We have to engage with the professionals that work within the hospital and make a plan that actually works for them.
Horwath says hospital overcrowding, or as it's commonly referred to, gridlock, needs to end. She says for the last 10 years, hospital budgets have been rolled back, but not in a way that would show money being physically cut from those budgets.
One of the things that we've seen is a decade of cuts to the hospital budgets, both through freezes and through below inflationary increases. And so cumulatively over a decade, that has caused a huge crisis in the hospital sector. Regional
ambulance availability is also a key piece for the NDP. Horwath was joined by candidates for both Thunder Bay Superior North and Thunder Bay Atikokan, Lise Vangeois and John Rafferty, who, if elected, would represent communities with limited ambulance capabilities.
Frankly, I don't know specifically for Thunder Bay Hospital. For many northern hospitals, though, I've heard of the challenges with opportunities for ambulance. I mean, so particularly in smaller communities, when you have only a couple of ambulances and those ambulances are being utilized for patient transfer, they're then taken out of the community.
Horwath also took time out of her tour to visit the Thunder Bay office of the Alzheimer's Society, meeting with administration and councillors who provide assistance to the families who have had their loved ones afflicted by Alzheimer's. Horwath says the issues facing those seeking medical care extends beyond the region, calling this a province-wide crisis, adding that long-term care is also facing a dire situation of its own. It's estimated that by the year 2020, 60,000 Ontario residents will be on the waiting list for long-term care. Adam Riley, TBT News.
The list of potential communities in the running to host a nuclear waste storage repository is now down to 5, and 3 reside here in the Northwest. In a release from the Nuclear Waste Management Organization earlier this week, both the Blind River and Elliott Lake areas are no longer being considered in the site selection process. The remaining 3 northern communities still being considered are Hornpain, Manitowocz, and Ignace. The NWMO is expecting to have a final site selected by the year 2023. Concerns over the Ring of Fire continue to be a topic of debate in Queen's Park, and once again, the opposition is taking the Wynne government to task over the time it has taken to get the project underway. Sault Ste. Marie MP P. Ross Romano says the government hasn't given the Ring of Fire the attention it deserves, and to back that up, he points to the project's absence from the government's fall economic statement.
Since discovered, this government has done nothing but made broken promises and entered into bad faith negotiations with respect to the ring. After 10 years since its discovery, construction of the roads are still not underway. In fact, the Ring of Fire isn't even mentioned in the most recent fall economic statement. So, Mr. Speaker, to the acting premier, will this government finally admit that any reference they make to the Ring of Fire is nothing more than an election plan?
The member opposite missed the announcement in August of this year. The Premier was in Thunder Bay with the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, the Minister of Northern Development, Mines, and myself as we made the announcement, followed through on our commitment. First Nations were in attendance at the announcement at the same time, Speaker, and everybody is aware that they have signed on moving forward not only with one road, an east-west, but also with a north-south from the Keena, Arrowland area straight north into Martin Falls as well.
And the Ring of Fire wasn't the only item the opposition went after the government on. Transportation, whether it be through the air, rail, or highways, has always been a part of the region's Achilles heel. Adam Riley has more on what could be a financial burden for residents of Northern Ontario.
Last week, the province announced that it would support an intercommunity bus service through the Ontario Northland Transportation Commission and other private carriers in the Northwest, providing once-a-day community bus service.
People living in Northern Ontario do have the right to rely on public transportation to travel between their communities, especially in those remote communities. Those communities include Hearst, Hornpain, White River, Red Lake, Emo, Rainy River, Fort Francis, Atikokan, Red Rock, and other communities.
But progressive conservatives at Queen's Park say those living in communities in the far north, the ones off of the provincial road networks, face undue financial hardship. This is due to a 148% increase in the aviation fuel tax.
As a direct result of this increase, Northerners have seen the cost of everything from food to fuel to personal travel for medical appointments go up. Will the Deputy Premier admit that this increase has created unnecessary hardships for Ontarians living in remote northern communities? Question. And will she agree to reverse this tax?
Since 2014, the province has added 1 cent per year to aviation fuel taxes. As of April 1st of this year, the rate sits at 6.7 cents per litre. Finance Minister Charles Sousa says the bulk of the increase comes from factors outside of provincial control.
Aviation fuel tax was previously amended in 1992, and it was at 2 cents a litre. The majority of aviation fuel is the federal tax, and we have made it clear that the recent decrease in jet fuel prices, greater than 4 cents per litre, increase in aviation fuel has been phased out between 2014 and 17.
Sousa says the aviation fuel tax is a way for many northern communities to receive an additional revenue stream for various infrastructure projects. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Coming up next, police in Dryden are urging residents to take precautions to prevent theft from their vehicles this holiday season. Well, as the holiday season approaches, police are advising people to secure their vehicles and their valuables while shopping. One way police in Dryden are hoping to reach out to residents is with friendly reminders through the Lock It or Lose It campaign. Adam Riley has the details.
To a thief, a parking lot during this time of the year is a great place to do some holiday shopping. But the Dryden Police Service is hoping to take away those opportunities with the annual Lock It or Lose It campaign. Chief Doug Paulson says city police have been participating in the campaign for several years, where police leave friendly reminders to residents to lock up their vehicles when out and about.
As time permits, officers will go around and check vehicles, whether they be on the street or in the parking lots of major retailer outlets and that sort of thing. And just to see if the people are being diligent and locking their vehicles and making sure the windows are shut or closed, and making sure that valuable items aren't left in plain view.
Paulson says it's a wide variety of items that would-be thieves are looking to steal, and admits that even he sometimes forgets to keep items out of sight.
And also even grocery items, like especially say meat and things like that. If it's left out there, that not that common, but it's anything of value. Electronics, things like that. Could be anything. People should also really be cognizant of, and it's something I personally, I'm bad for leaving change in the console of my vehicle. They walk the streets and they check vehicles, and they're really looking for change.
Paulson says people are getting the message. However, over the course of one weekend in Dryden, officers were able to hand out over 200 of these notices, some good, some bad. He expects by the time the campaign wraps sometime in the beginning of the new year, over 1,000 will be placed on windshields in the community. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Greenstone has a new logo to represent the municipality. This comes after several months of development with a Thunder Bay-based advertising firm. Since amalgamation, Greenstone has been using the logo of Geraldton, and council felt there was a need to change it to represent all 7 communities that make up the municipality. Mayor Ronald Beaulieu says every day the communities become closer, and the new signage will help reinforce that togetherness.
But this is something that I find with this new compass idea that we're looking at for a logo, is that it really represents, all of Greenstone. It's going to be in a way where it will be unique right across. All the way it's going to be the same logo that will represent Greenstone. And I think that's key.
The overall cost of the development was less than $15,000. Implementation of the new signage will be ready for the 2018 tourism season. Wednesday was the deadline for Ontario college students who were caught up in the month-long strike to opt out of their programs. The option allowed those who decided not to return to class to receive a full refund of their tuition. And as Shane Pasquino reports, the number of those taking advantage of the opt-out at Confederation College was right in line with what happened across the province.
Ontario college students are back into a somewhat normal routine as the 5-week faculty strike has now come and gone. Students at Confederation College had a number of different options when the strike ended 2 weeks ago, one being to opt out of class and receive a full tuition refund. As it stands now, 403 students chose that option, making that around 14% of full-time enrollment. According to college president Jim Matter, that is right around the provincial average.
Well, right across the province, it's landed between about 12 and 15%. In a quote normal year, if I can put it that way, one without a strike, we lose between 5 and 7% of our students during the year. I'd expect a number of those students, again, who have dropped out to come back either in January or next fall. But we're going to keep in touch with them and provide them with some opportunities.
If those students do decide to revisit their studies at any of Ontario's 24 colleges, their eligibility for both classes and OSAP will not be affected by the opt-out in any way. Student Union President Jody Afonso says those who did not choose to opt out felt it was better for them in the long run.
They've chosen it for their own personal reasons, whether that's financial or whether that be that they, if they feel that they can't catch up. And that's a lot of what students are saying at this junction.
86% of Confederation College students didn't choose to opt out and decided to finish the semester they started back in September. Answers varied when it came to why they ultimately decided to stick it out.
going to school's hard enough. So I put in enough work that I thought that I should just stick it out, even though it's going to be hard.
I currently live in residence, and my hometown is like 6 hours away, so I wouldn't have gotten my money back for res, so I just thought I might as well just stay in.
Students who decided to stay also have a few options to be reimbursed for reasons such as daycare for their children and travel plans they were forced to change. The college also kept a March break on the schedule, something that students were afraid they may lose. Shane Pasquino, TBT News.
That'll do it for this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Leanne Evans. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us next time.